itself, ranging from sovereignty to obscenity to hate speech and so on, it's communal violence, so on and so forth. And as a result, there is an elaborate structure of laws on offensive speech laws, hate speech laws, criminal defamation, Official Secrets Act, UAPA, sedition, which has been put in abeyance last year by the Supreme Court. But the reality is these laws are used very liberally by whichever government is in power. Some governments are more respectful of it, some are not. And yes, there are instances where state governments have been extremely, you can say, draconian while using these laws, because police comes under the jurisdiction of a state government. And this is the problem that sort of Trumpsian governments or parties, and the reality is that media operates under a very vulnerable, extremely cumbersome legal system, which makes the current law even more problematic, because there are already enough and more laws that are used every day to impinge press freedom, including independent journalists like Rana. But they're the ones which are far more vulnerable. And on top of the government is making the procedures even more easy lately. And this government especially is using those laws with great advantage for muzzling free speech.
Well, no doubt these discussions could continue for many more hours, but unfortunately we've run out of time. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our guests, Rana Ayub, Ashish Shukla and Anant Nath. Thank you so much. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again at any time by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And you can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Nick Clark, and the whole team, it's goodbye for now.
The American people have spoken, but what exactly did they say? Is the world looking for a whole new order with less America in it? Is the woke agenda on the decline in America? How much do social media companies know about you, and how easy is it to manipulate you?
A quizzical look at US politics, the bottom line.
We are all responsible. Even people far away are also helping with the environment problems in the Amazon because they are consumers.
I teach kids about the threats that our oceans are facing today.
I've been working in earnest, trying to find ways to get this language out to the kids.
What do we do as the ocean warriors? And what are you going to do to keep our oceans clean?
It's our language that keeps the Arapaho blood flowing.
Women rights groups say that they have won several battles in their fight for equality in Latin America, and those protesting say that protecting women remains a challenge in the region.
My body, my choice. I will not stop being pro-life.
I want freedom. We don't have freedom in this country.
These evacuees now face a 3-day journey to a shelter in western Ukraine.
Someone destroys our country and someone needs to rebuild.
Tough times demand tough questions. What exactly are you asking for? You want troops on the ground? Through rigorous debate, we challenge conventional wisdom.
Racism is so deeply entrenched in the country that it's identified with America itself. When you challenge racism, it looks as if you're challenging America.
And demand the truth.
There's no serious discussion about this because it goes to the very root of who we are.
Up front with me, Mark Lamont Hill, on Al Jazeera.
On Counting the Cost, the global economy is fracturing. Is this the end of globalization? The world's super rich became far wealthier than everyone else over the last 2 years. Plus, China dominates the rare earth market, but Europe has just found its largest deposit of the metals. Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera.
The US designates the Wagner Group as an international criminal organisation for supplying mercenaries to Russia. I'm Tom McRae, this is Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also coming up, Germany refuses to commit to sending tanks to Ukraine despite pressure from its NATO allies. Dozens injured in Peru as police confront protesters demanding the resignation of the president. Plus, how low can it go? We take a closer look at Lebanon's lira as the country enters a 4th year of economic crisis. Well, the US is designating Russia's Wagner Group as an international criminal organisation. The White House says about 50,000 of its mercenaries are fighting in Ukraine. The classification will allow the US to apply wider sanctions to the group. Mike Hanna reports from Washington, D.C.
A third force in the Ukraine conflict, soldiers from Russia's Wagner Group, essentially hired mercenaries, many of them hired from Russian prisons. The group is controlled by Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, and this week featured in a video made by his own media service, visiting injured fighters in a St. Petersburg clinic.
You must not pity a soldier at war. You must take care of him. Therefore, each soldier should be unique.
With more than 50,000 deployed in Ukraine, the Wagner Group has been on the US radar for a number of months, and now it's been declared a significant transnational criminal organization.
In coordination with this designation, we will also impose additional sanctions next week against Wagner and its support network across multiple continents. These actions recognize the transcontinental threat that Wagner poses, including through its ongoing pattern of serious criminal activity.
At the same time, though, the US maintains that a mounting rivalry between the Wagner Group and the formal Russian military could impact on Russian performance in the ongoing war.
We are seeing indications, including in intelligence, that tensions between Wagner and the Russian Ministry of Defense are increasing. Wagner is becoming a rival power center to the Russian military and other Russian ministries.
The Russian army has a very low morale. So the only way to spike morale and to bring victories is to bring these people who get a lot of money, who are basically professional mercenaries and also professional criminals released from jails. That's what Stalin actually did as well.
The US has also accused North Korea of arming the Wagner Group, displaying images of what it says are Russian rail cars being loaded with North Korean weapons systems, potentially putting the group in a position where it could change battlefield dynamics in Ukraine, something the US clearly hopes its sanctions will help prevent. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, the Wagner Group has denied recruiting Serbs to fight in Ukraine. It issued the statement after pro-Ukraine activists filed criminal complaints against the organisation. Serbian law prohibits citizens from participating in conflicts abroad. Earlier, President Aleksandar Vučić condemned Wagner after it called for volunteer fighters in Serbian language ads. Well, Germany has not yet decided whether to send Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, despite pressure from NATO partners. Defence ministers from more than 50 countries met in Germany on Friday to discuss the next stage of military support for Kyiv. Steph Varson reports from Ramstein Air Base.
US Defence Secretary Lloyd Austin was hoping to deliver better news to his Ukrainian counterpart at the Ramstein Air Base. But there was to be no commitment from Germany that it would send its Leopard tanks to Ukraine.
We don't fear anything. We have just a responsibility for our population in Germany and in Europe. And we have to balance all the pros and cons before we decide things like that, just like that. This is nothing else. And I'm very sure that there will be a decision in the short term, but I don't know why, and I don't know how the decision will look.
This lack of a concrete timeline is despite Germany's NATO allies and Ukraine itself pressuring hard for the tanks to be sent.
I encourage you to make such decisions that can deprive Russian evil of any power. You can start this policy today. It is in your power to make a Ramstein of tanks, not to bargain about different numbers of tanks, but to open a principled supply that will stop Russian evil.
Some fear that sending Leopard tanks could mean an escalation of the war and drag NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia. The tanks have been sold to dozens of countries around the world. Those who want to export them to Ukraine need permission from Germany first.
After weeks of international pressure, Germany has made it clear that it will take a decision on whether or not to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine in its own time. President Zelensky's plea that time is not a luxury his country has had little effect, because Germany says it's a decision that needs to be carefully weighed.
Despite the setback, there have been promises of new military hardware for Ukraine. US Defense Secretary Austin urging countries not to waste too much time.
This is a decisive decade for the world. And this is a decisive moment for Ukraine's struggle to defend itself. So this contact group will not slow down. We're going to continue to dig deep, and based upon the progress that we've made today, I'm confident that Ukraine's partners from around the globe are determined to meet this moment.
In Berlin, a group of protesters also tried to put pressure on the government to take a decision on sending Leopard tanks sooner rather than later. Steph Varson, Al Jazeera, at Ramstein Air Base.
Ali Hashim has the reaction from the Kremlin.
It's a matter of concern for Moscow, and we can see that in the lines coming from the Russian Foreign Ministry that sees supplying Kyiv with more weapons will escalate the situation as per the Foreign Ministry and will cause more casualties. The Foreign Ministry also accused the West of hypocrisy for ignoring the casualties on the other side of the borders as per the Russians. Now, also the Kremlin warned that this the supply of weapons will take the conflict into another level and will put NATO face to face with the Russians. The Kremlin urged the Western alliance to take into consideration the concerns of Moscow, because this could help de-escalate. However, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Kremlin, said that nothing is going to change in the field, and this is just creating more targets for the Russians. And this is kind of escalating the rhetoric here in Moscow. Moscow, with more concerns now, is also taking into consideration the situation with respect to its public opinion. So it's reaching to the foreign countries, trying to give a position, a stance, but also trying to soothe the concerns inside the country and try to convey a message that there are still options, trying to raise the stake and say everything is going to according to the plan.
Dozens of people have been injured in Peru as police confronted crowds demanding the resignation of President Dina Boluarte. They want Congress shut down, elections held and a new constitution brought in. Boluarte has accused them of trying to seize power and warned anyone breaking the law will be prosecuted. At least 50 people have been killed in confrontations with security forces since early December. An impeachment, a new president and a state of emergency. A lot has happened in Peru since former leader Pedro Castillo tried to dissolve Congress. On December the 7th, he was removed from office and replaced by the vice president, Dina Boluarte. Castillo was charged with rebellion and conspiracy. Protests broke out in his strongholds, rural areas, mostly in the south of Peru. A nationwide state of emergency was declared on December the 14th as protesters blocked roads and stormed airports. Then this week, a two-day national strike was held in the capital, but it spread into a third day, and people say they won't leave until their demands are met. Mariana Sanchez has more now from Lima.
Well, these protesters have been clashing with police for the third night in a row. They are here, and about a block away is police that has been throwing tear gas at them. The police has blocked the access towards the entry of Presidential Palace and Congress, but protesters are in different parts of the surrounding areas, clashing with police throwing rocks at them.
I am from Puno. I want to inform people of the reality of this forgotten rural Peru, a region that not only has poverty but also malnutrition. The Peruvian state has forgotten our region, our children who do not have good quality health care and education. It's a region that produces copper, gold, richness that contribute to the state, yet they don't care about us.
Protests have gone on in other parts of the country as well. In Cusco, in Puno, as well as in Arequipa, where protesters tried to take over the airport. These protesters say they want human rights organizations in the country to verify the prosecution of those who have killed the victims, the nearly 50 people that have died in the last few weeks in the protests. For now, these protesters say that no matter what, they will stay in the streets of the capital and all over the country until Dina Boluarte resigns.
Well, police in Brazil have carried out raids on people suspected of being involved in the storming of government buildings earlier this month. Supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro attacked the Presidential Palace, the National Congress and the Supreme Federal Court. They claim President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva lost October's elections. Monica Yanakiev has more from Rio de Janeiro.
They're accused of instigating what the Brazilian government is calling an attempted coup. They're being charged with trying to destroy democracy in Brazil, which was just back. Brazil ended its military regime in 1985. So these three people, one of them is a truck driver, another person is a former public servant who was working for the government of former President Jair Bolsonaro, who is now in Florida and has been there since before Lula's inauguration because he did not want to pass on the presidential sash. And then there's a woman. They have been, the proofs that they have against them is videos that they have posted on social media, one of them calling for the uprising and for the riots that happened on January the 8th when they stormed the Presidential Palace, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, destroyed objects of very valuable and historical objects, destroyed all the windows and doors. They've been posting that also. They were calling for blockades of oil refineries.
Lebanon's currency, the lira, has lost around 95% of its value since the start of the country's economic meltdown in 2019. It's now trading at close to 50,000 to 1 against the US dollar. Now, instead of implementing much-needed reforms, the political elite is accused of creating a confusing exchange rate system that's hurting people who rely on it the most. Zona Hodder reports from Beirut.
Goods, services, hospital fees, insurance, they're all priced in foreign currency. Lebanon's economy has become dollarized because the local currency is nearly worthless.
We buy everything in dollars, our goods, our rent, electricity. Yes, we should price in the local currency, but it's not possible because its value keeps fluctuating.
Trading is dominated by the black market exchange rate. It's hovering around 50,000 lira to the dollar, causing even more economic difficulties for people already struggling to get by. But it's not the only rate. Politicians and bankers are accused of creating a multiple exchange rate system to cover up losses in the billions of dollars.
Banks have a big solvency problem. They deposited their money in the public sector at the central bank and the government. The public sector is unable to pay them back. They have this major gap, and they are trying to shift it to depositors through the haircut. And how do they do the haircut? Through this multiple exchange rate system.
It's known as the LOLAR, Lebanese dollar, or bank rate, and it is used to withdraw trapped foreign currency deposits. And while the official rate has been pegged at 1,500 lira to the dollar since 1997, the government says the fiscal situation means it has to collect taxes and fees at another rate. And then there is the Sayrafa rate.
Sayrafa is one of the policies introduced by the central bank to protect the devaluating lira. It involves pumping dollars into the market from its dwindling foreign currency reserves through this exchange platform, but it's proven to be unsustainable.
Authorities are planning to increase the official rate tenfold next month, which they say will help alleviate the crisis. Economists disagree.
When you are trying to artificially fix the Lebanese pound at 15,000, and everybody knows that your central bank doesn't have anymore any liquidity because it's actually running losses of more than $60 billion. So there is no credibility to this new exchange rate.
The political and business elite are blamed for failing to implement reforms in the financial sector. Instead, they have been offering temporary solutions that many Lebanese say benefit them and worsen a crisis that's now in its fourth year. Sana Khuder, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Well, still ahead on Al Jazeera, Tesla tweets. Elon Musk tries to downplay the power of his social media presence during his fraud trial. And how the warming climate is forcing a change of lifestyle for nomadic herders in the Himalayas.
Now, all the dynamic weather in Europe is right in the south, over the open waters of the Mediterranean. There have been winter storm after winter storm, and that's caused quite a lot of trouble, particularly around Italy, the Balkans, less so, I have to say, further north in, for example, Poland. So Albania is the latest place to give us pictures of flooding, and it's fairly widespread. It is overflowing rivers, generally speaking. It's persistent rain, all being drained away, but it should be frozen at this time of year. This is remarkably warm, and therefore flooding has been a problem, and will carry on being a problem. Some degree maybe in Italy, most likely still places like Albania and possibly even Bulgaria, because temperatures here remain quite high. There is snow falling now over the heights in the Balkans, and that's been a change of weather type. And the snow falling right the way up through Eastern Europe to the southern Baltic. And this coldish air is tend to trend further westwards. The temperatures are quite low, and it also emanates in that cold Mistral wind blowing down the Rhone Valley in France. All this will continue during Sunday to some degree, an enhancement in the rain moving into western Greece as well. Watch out there. For most of North Africa, this time of the year should be quite quiet, and it is. Well, there's an onshore breeze and rain in Algeria and Tunisia, and a few showers in West Africa.
How do states control information?
Moscow is one of the most surveilled cities in the world. It has an incredible system of facial recognition technology.
How does the narrative inform public opinion?
There is no other leader as popular.
How is citizen journalism reframing the story?
The video spread like wildfire.
They deny the effect of war in Ukraine.
The Listening Post dissects the media.
We don't cover the news. We cover the way the news is covered.
You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories this hour. The US is designating Russia's Wagner Group as an international criminal organization.